This week, two hopeful presidents did two very different podcasts. Kamala Harris showed up for the girl bosses on the Call Her Daddy podcast, which is what Joe Biden calls her when she wakes him up for a diaper change. Meanwhile, Donald Trump showed up for the Dude Bros on Andrew Schulz's Flagrant podcast. Or at least, I think it was him, I don't know. Shane Gillis's impression is getting really good. Not to be outdone though, the Hawk Tour girl just announced that on her podcast, she'll be interviewing the real leader of the United States, Benjamin Netanyahu. Politicians and YouTubers collaborating might seem a little confusing to older people, but you have to realize that both candidates have a lot in common with YouTubers. For example, Kamala Harris reacts to almost everything with a weirdly fake laugh, and while Trump is live, fans try to clip him. Besides, we all know there's one thing that every president and every YouTuber loves more than anything else. That's right, drones.
Oh, fuck! My refugee camp! It's ruined!
Welcome back to the review. I'm Lewis Spears. Like, subscribe, and let's break it down. This election is coming up fast, and it's really, really close. Seemingly, every mainstream media platform has done whatever they can to help their chosen candidate, and now the politicians are turning to podcasters to push them over the line and win those final few votes that will decide the future of America and the free world. And look, it might seem like a weird move to some, but turning to comedians and podcasters to get people to like you is a much better strategy than getting TikTokers to show up to your rallies.
We need Trump back. Really bad.
But even that is a better idea than getting Lil Pump to show up to your rallies.
And speaking of sound, music, and other things, one of the big superstars of the world, Lil Pimp. MAGA 2020. Don't forget that. Do not vote for Sleepy Joe at all.
Yeah, great idea, Donald. How's Kamala going to compete with the Gucci Gang guy? Oh, yeah, that's right. The most influential female artist of all time. And Beyonce. Can you hear that? That's the Beehive commenting, actually, Taylor Swift's nowhere near as influential as Beyonce. Yeah, whatever. Call me when Beyonce can make millions of teen girls pretend to find a guy with CTE interesting. In this video, I'm going to break down both podcasts with both candidates, and we're going to look at the reaction to both of them, which is even more interesting. Then we're going to ask the big question, okay? The big boy. Are we going to see Kamala or Trump on the Joe Rogan podcast? After that, I've got a little hypothesis for you. Stick around for that. Let's get into it. What's interesting about this election is how close it is, and it's really seemingly not going to be swayed by policy decisions, okay? We all know that politics is essentially a popularity contest, but this is really the first time that both candidates have leaned so far into the influencer space that this election might just come down to who was more likable on the most recent podcast episode. What we are watching happen in real time is both presidential candidates slowly morphing into social media influencers. It's getting so bad that if Kamala Harris wins the election, her acceptance speech is going to be sponsored by BetterHelp. If Trump wins, he's going to drop a promo code for Blue Chew. Let me tell you, if I had Blue Chew when I was digging down Stormy Daniels, she would be so satisfied that she would not be suing me. I promise you that. Yeah, I'm not an impressions guy. I'm sorry. If presidents keep podcasting, people are going to stop wanting the I voted sticker. They're going to start chasing the I signed up to the Patreon badge. Speaking of Patreon, by the way, you know I've got one of those. But more importantly, are you subscribed? I'm getting a bunch of comments from people recently going, oh, I just found this channel. It's so funny. All right, subscribe, stick around, leave a like and a comment. It's great. We're uploading the review every couple of days. I'm engaging with the community. It's really working. I'm happy to have you here. Let's continue. First up, we've got Andrew Schulz's Flagrant. This is a podcast hosted by Andrew Schulz, Akaash, Singh, Mark Gagnon, Alex Media, and about 35 other people that are sitting out of frame. I don't know. The cast keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's a great show. Andrew is a good friend of mine. I've opened for him when he's performed in Australia. We've run around New York a little bit, and I'm just realizing I've actually briefly appeared on a Flagrant episode. That means that I've done the same podcast as President Donald Trump. That's weird.
Aaron is 18, he's handsome, he's tall, he's rich.
He's got the whole ball.
He's unleashed in New York City. Are you sure you want to reverse Roe v. Wade now?
This, I think, was a brilliant move by Trump because if there's one place where he can really shine and excel and show off the personality that makes people fall in love with him, it's like a Dude Bro podcast. There's a podcast where dudes are hanging out, joking, laughing, taking the piss out of each other, ribbing each other, and every now and then having serious discussions and going back and forth with bigger ideas. Flagrant's the perfect space for Trump to do what he does best, which is just be like a funny old grandpa who's pretty quick and sharp.
I'm good with names, you know.
You are. Tampon Tim was good. Is
The
that?
problem with Tampon Tim, it's hard to say. There are some, like Comrade Kamala. It's a little hard to say. She's not bad, but when you put the names together, it's a little, you got to be able to pume.
Kamala Harris, however, chose the Call Her Daddy podcast. This is a former sex podcast, now leaning more into just women's issues and living as a woman in general podcast. She's been described a lot as the female Joe Rogan. It's the #2 podcast in the world. Seemingly every girl on the planet listens to this show. So it's a really great pick for Kamala, where she can come into this and really just act like the safe, supportive, welcoming and understanding mother of the country, which her base really loves. So both of these two podcast picks by each candidate is a great move for the image they're trying to create and the demographic that they're chasing, which is 18 to 35-year-olds. Trump wants men, Kamala wants women. Great picks by whoever made these decisions, and huge wins for Flagrant, huge wins for Call Her Daddy. It legitimizes both of those platforms an unbelievable amount. Geez, you start talking about Trump and you immediately pick up his mannerisms. I don't think I've ever done this in my life. Don't screenshot this. It's not one of them, all right? You talk about Trump enough and you just start acting like him, all right? Kamala Harris is gay. I'm sorry, terrible impression. I shouldn't try. It's not good. Both these candidates going on podcasts so close to the election day is really interesting because normally, with all the previous elections, you would see presidents going on mainstream media. But mainstream media, as we know, is really, really failing to prove that they have the influence that they used to have. And even the influence that they say they have right now, they really insist that they're able to sway elections, change minds, sell products to advertisers, for advertisers. But it really seems to be flagging, and the whole world is slowly but surely catching up to that. Especially President Trump, who is often treated very poorly by the mainstream media, and often that treatment is deserved because he'll tell a lie or he'll be involved in a controversy, and journalists will grill him accordingly. But it really doesn't serve him at all to be doing these mainstream media platforms when he can get just as many, if not more, eyeballs in a long-form format on podcasts that will treat him a lot nicer than some journalists will. Another example of this is Donald Trump pulling out of a previously agreed-upon interview with 60 Minutes, which breaks a tradition that every single presidential candidate has had for many, many, many elections, where they both go on 60 Minutes at the same time and they both get interviewed so the country can see opposing viewpoints. Trump pulled out of this, which is unheard of, and 60 Minutes grilled him for it.
Then, a week ago, Trump backed out. The campaign offered shifting explanations. First, it complained that we would fact-check the interview. We fact-check every story. Later, Trump said he needed an apology for his interview in 2020. Trump claims correspondent Leslie Stahl said in that interview that Hunter Biden's controversial laptop came from Russia. She never said that.
This journalist guy is really trying his best to remain professional, but you know if he was allowed to write the script, it would have gone like this. Donald Trump is a pussy little bitch and a lying coward who is too scared to face me in verbal combat. But it's not just Trump who is prioritizing influencers and targeting their audiences. Kamala Harris is also collaborating with a lot of YouTubers and influencers to catch their audiences. This is something that Democratic candidates never usually do, mainly because Joe Biden's so old he doesn't know what a phone is unless it's attached to a landline. But it's also because mainstream media personalities have an uncanny ability to make the candidates that they like look unbelievably lame. Fox News is great at making Trump look like the pick for crazies. And have a look at this clip of Kamala Harris cringing at how she is being sold to Drew Barrymore's audience. Even she knows that this makes her look like a loser.
I've been thinking that we really all need a tremendous hug in the world right now. But in our country, we need you to be Mamala of the country.
We need you to be Mamala of the country? What an awful idea for a slogan. I bet even the most staunch Republican would be okay with you aborting that idea.
We need you to be Mamala of the country.
Look at her face, dude. She's going, yeah, She's just nodding so she can get out of that conversation as quickly as possible. That's the facial expression I make outside of a 7-Eleven when a crackhead wants to show me one of his wounds.
Boy, look at this. Look at this.
That actually happened to me in Venice Beach, by the way. A real homeless guy came up to show me his injection wounds. That's the first person I spoke to in LA. What a terrible city.
Just look at the body language. Am I the only one getting unbearably horny vibes from Drew Barrymore? She's like, I really need a hug from mommy right now. Please breastfeed me, Kamala. It's very weird. Also, of course, it's very alluring to fall into the warm, fuzzy-wuzzy feelings of believing in utopia if only your candidate gets elected. But I don't know if we should be assigning this motherly image to a woman who is ultimately going to be doing a lot of drone bombing of villages. You know what I mean? Like, sure, she's going to be the first woman president, and that is very girl boss of her, but we also know she will be committing war crimes, you know? All right, she's got that in her. She's got that in her as well. There's a reason they've got her up there on that podium, and it's because she's okay with a certain percentage of civilian deaths. But what I'm pointing out here, you'll start to see it everywhere, is that even when mainstream media outlets are trying to promote the candidate that they like, whether it's CNN pushing Kamala or Fox News pushing Trump, they almost invariably fail to make their chosen candidate look like a freak or a loser or a psycho. Whereas, whenever these politicians show who they are in a long-form format, an hour plus of content, both of them often end up coming across as more likable than the opposition or even the people who like them proclaim them to be. A perfect example of this is Donald Trump's hour-long video where he just plays golf with a professional golfer. It's an incredible YouTube video. I was locked in the entire time. I didn't even care about golf. I was just amazed at how well both of them played the game and interacted with each other. And I feel like I learned a lot more about the type of dude that both of these people are. And it's because it's long form and it's not really edited down.
Oh yeah, get up there. Get up. Yes, yes. Way to go!
God, look at that swing. That's actually incredible. This man's almost 80, all right? Joe Biden reckons he could beat Trump at golf? Absolutely not. The only thing Biden can beat Trump at is, well, the only thing that matters. Elections. Now, first, let's have a look at Donald Trump on the Flagrant podcast with Andrew Schulz. Now, Andrew is a good mate of mine and someone that I'm very, very inspired by. I think he's one of the smartest comics working, especially with the online content game. We've talked about that a lot, he and I think that what he's doing is great. But what I think was really smart about him having Trump on is actually the episode before Trump went on. No one's talking about this. He had on billionaire Mark Cuban, who has been unbelievably critical of Donald Trump and really expressed his disdain for the guy on the previous episode of Flagrant.
Donald Trump's going to put himself first. You talk about what happened before. Every single thing he's done. Those 44 cabinet members who came out against him, they didn't say we disagreed. They said he was unfit for office because he did shit for himself.
This was a really smart move by Schulz and the Flagrant team, and I'll tell you why. Whenever you have a political candidate from the left or the right, people are going to accuse you of being very biased or trying to promote one political party over the other. Now, normally what you could do is just have a politician from the other team on, and then you look a lot more fair and balanced. However, it's almost impossible to do that with presidents. I would say the only person that can get both presidential candidates on a podcast is maybe Joe Rogan or hopefully Alex Jones, InfoWars. But by having Mark Cuban on the show, the episode before Trump, an episode where Mark basically spent at least a third of it trashing Donald Trump and telling people why they should not vote for him, this makes Flagrant and Andrew Schulz look like a much more fair and balanced show that will hear both sides and will make fun of both sides. Because we got to remember, Schulz is a comedian first. Flagrant is a comedy podcast first. Comedy comes before anything else on that show, as it should, as it does on this channel. This way, Schulz keeps both sides of the political spectrum of his fan base happy because he's heard both sides out in a really big way on a really big platform right before the election. So if I'm a Democrat, I understand. If I'm a Republican, I also understand. Genius move. Here's Trump's episode.
I'm going to make this country great again. It's not a great country right now.
It's always a great country.
See,
it's always a great country.
So we haven't answered it. That was the best dodge of a question.
You know what?
You almost charmed us out of it.
Trying to get out of it.
It's a great episode. I highly recommend you watch the full thing. But just from that clip, we get a sense of a lot of things, all right? Obviously, it's mostly banter, hanging out with Trump, having a good time, trying to make the audience laugh and show them who he personally is before showing him his policies and all that kind of stuff, which, you know, is fine. Trump has other interviews where people will grill him for his policies. He's got this one to kind of show off who he is as like a regular guy. That said, in the episode, you get to see Schulz push back a lot on some of the things that Trump was saying. You see in the podcast clip, he pushed back on Trump saying that America is not great at the moment. Schulz says that it is and really doesn't let Trump get away with that. That's awesome. That'd be really difficult to do, especially with a very powerful conversational force like Trump. He also got a ripper abortion joke in, which I absolutely love, and that could have gotten Trump into a lot of trouble, but, you know, seemingly those days are over with social media. A few people are upset, but it doesn't seem to scratch him at all. And honestly, I think that this podcast will be very, very important for Trump's campaign. 18 to 35-year-old dudes are very tapped into the Flagrant podcast. That's a huge demographic for the Trump campaign. And those people are just not watching TV or listening to radio anymore. They're listening to podcasts. So Trump going on here is a brilliant move. Now, please don't misinterpret my praise for good political campaign decisions to mean I think you should vote for this candidate or the other, all right? I'm an aspiring immigrant, so you know who I hope wins the election? The winner. Whoever wins will have my full-throated support, all right? No, but honestly, I do hope that Kamala Harris wins. Not because I want Trump to lose, I just want him to keep campaigning. Like, he's so good at campaigning. It's so entertaining to watch. And to be honest, I think he likes campaigning more than he likes being president. Have you seen him up there at his rallies? He's having a great time. He's improving, he's riffing, he's playing music, he's dancing. He loves campaigning. I don't think he liked being president. I think he liked trying to win and then winning the election, and then he just had to do a lot of paperwork. Fuck that. Put me on the road, brother. I know how that feels. There's nothing worse than coming home after a successful tour and then having to do paperwork and accounting after it's done. I don't want to do that. I want to get on planes and perform. I understand Trump. Put me on the road. Before we get into the reaction to Trump's podcast, let's jump over to Kamala Harris on Call Her Daddy and have a look at how she did.
I'm curious, like, you don't do too many long-form interviews. What made you want to do Call Her Daddy today?
Well, I think you and your listeners have really got this thing right, which is one of the best ways to communicate with people is to be real, you know, and to talk about the things that people really care about. I mean, what I love about what you do is that your voice in your show is really about your listeners. And I think especially now, this is a moment in the country and in life where people really want to know they're seen and heard and that they're part of a community, that they're not out there alone. And so I'm really glad to be with you.
Yeah, you can really tell the difference of experience between Trump and Kamala when it comes to these more candid, longer form interviews. That was such a politician's scripted answer. You can tell that she doesn't listen to the show. She just said a bunch of stuff about being genuine. Like, you could come onto any podcast or YouTube channel and talk about connection with audience and being real and all that kind of stuff. That really just feels like an answer straight out of an intern, you know what I mean? Although, in Kamala's defense, it would be pretty difficult to be what the Call Her Daddy audience would expect from a female guest, because if she did that, they'd just be talking about deep-throating and anal for an entire hour. I mean, have a look at the previous episodes before Kamala Harris. We've got cheating 101, blowjobs, hall passes, and frat daddies, and then Vice President Kamala Harris. What a tone switch. And to Alice Cooper, the host's credit, she did kind of mainly focus on abortion, which is a big, big issue in the States. Not like it is in Australia or most other countries, but it really splits the nation and can decide elections. So that's what they mainly focused on because it's a woman's podcast for women, and that's a big issue for chicks. So that's what Kamala Harris is trying to tap into. Just like Trump on Flagrant, that 18 to 35-year-old women market is Kamala's base, and this is where they are.
One of the biggest conversations in this year's election revolves around a woman's body.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I want to take a moment, and can we try to think of any law that gives the government the power to make a decision?
I know what you're going to ask.
About a man's body. Let's
No.
Is there any law?
No.
I've got one. The draft. When you turn 18 in the States, you have to sign up for the draft. If you don't do it, you'll go to prison. And then if the United States goes to war, if you're signed up to the draft, they can draft you and force you to be a soldier and fight on foreign soil. That's a pretty big one, all right? That's a pretty big one. And I feel like not acknowledging that that is a law that controls men's bodies is a silly move, because if you want to win an election, you obviously need the support of both sexes. Comparing the two podcasts on a purely like campaign level, let's not think about politics, let's think about trying to win the election. I feel like Kamala Harris stepping into politician mode and Alex Cooper stepping into journalist mode was a bit of a misstep for both of them. I feel like everyone would have much preferred to hear Kamala Harris having a laugh and a joke with a woman about living life as a woman more than they would enjoy two chicks agreeing on the biggest and most publicized policies that everybody already knows about. I feel like it was a missed opportunity to show a huge portion of the Democrats' base what Kamala Harris is like, and that she can be like a fun, cool woman who's also trying to get elevated to the most powerful position in the world. I feel like it was a bit of a lost opportunity, whereas Trump on the Flagrant podcast, he stepped into the Flagrant podcast in Flagrant podcast mode. You could tell that he'd been worded up about what the podcast and the show is about and is like, and he slipped into that energy, and he gave Flagrant fans what they want, and he showed off a side of his personality that we all know is here that really makes people fall in love with Trump, which is his funny, jovial, quick-witted, edgy side. So I think Trump nailed his podcast appearance. I think Kamala Harris, yeah, she did what a politician does, which is be a politician, when really what I think would have been better is if she went on there as like a human being, a flawed, fun, jovial person. And I don't think she did that. And as a consequence of this, there really aren't very many clips of this podcast with Kamala Harris going viral on social media in the same way that all of these clips with the Flagrant podcast does. Kamala Harris kind of did what everyone expected her to do, and there was nothing shocking or shareable or viral about it, which, you know, doesn't mean she's a bad politician. I just feel like if we're talking about getting name out there and becoming likable and inspiring people to vote for you that might be on the fence, I feel like it was a bit of a missed opportunity for Kamala Harris's campaign. Over on the Trump side of things, clips are going ballistically viral all across the internet. Here's what Schulz had to say about the reception to this episode.
Both sides were using the same clips to promote their narratives. So, like, for example, Trump did this thing about how he doesn't ramble, he weaves. Yep. And Kamala's headquarters saw the thing on the video, and they're like, yo, make a video out of that. Look how ridiculous this is. But then Trump's team is also like, yo, make a video out of that. That's huge fire. So the same piece of content was used to support the candidate and to try to trash the candidate.
And this points to how polarizing Donald Trump is, where two people can see the same clip and hate him or love him with the same context. It just depends on the type of person the viewer is, right? And there were so many tweets sharing the exact same clip where they were angry or absolutely enthused and loving it. And this, again, from a purely campaign perspective, is exactly what you want for your candidate, left or right? You want people talking about clips, debating about it, sharing them, and hopefully it's mostly positive, which it does seem to be for the Trump thing. Whereas I'm not seeing this level of reaction at all for Kamala Harris. I feel like her biggest weakness is that she's just kind of boring compared to Trump. And that's why a lot of people love her, because she's not as chaotic and scary and dangerous seeming as people view Trump to be, but she's not getting these moments that make people see, oh, she's like a regular human like I am, that Trump is really good at getting. Although Kamala Harris will have a second opportunity to show the more real side of her when she does the Howard Stern radio show, a radio show known for getting identical twins on to make out with each other. Obviously, this is a very close election, but I know how Kamala Harris can win the election for sure. When she goes on Howard Stern, all she's got to do is ride the Sibian. She will win by a fucking landslide. Get on the Sibian for America, Kamala Harris. I think we've got a clip from a trailer of Kamala Harris's appearance.
It's not a big deal to you, I mean. Wow, look at that bra. What is that, Triple H? Oh, those are big.
No, I'm kidding. Here's the real clip of Kamala on Howard Stern.
Doesn't support our friend Ukraine. Doesn't support, therefore,
something America should always, and has always, by the way, been a champion of, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity, which means the importance of standing against anyone who tries to take another nation by force.
And in this clip, you can see that Kamala Harris is still sticking to her policy guns. She's really trying to show off that she would be a much more competent, experienced political politician, whereas Trump's campaign, it's all personality and, hey, look at me, and spectacle. So this election, or at least the campaigns for the candidates, really does seem to be policy versus personality. Kamala is trying to be the politician. Trump is trying to be the spectacle. Both are very effective, but we'll see which one works. At this point, I'd just like to acknowledge how crazy it is. As a podcaster, right, I'm a comic with a podcaster. It is insane to see presidents and presidential candidates doing podcasts with comedians. That's crazy. I would have never imagined that that would become a thing. And I don't think anyone in the media or politics or other comedians themselves could have imagined how prolific these presidential candidates are being when in regards to podcasts and social media influencers. This is crazy. I mean, I remember the first time that a president did a podcast was 2015. Barack Obama went on WTF by Mark Maron. That blew my 21-year-old mind. I just started my podcast and Barack Obama showed up to a guy's house to record an audio-only podcast. That made worldwide headlines. That was insane. But now, it's normal. Every other week, there's an episode with Donald Trump or Kamala Harris on something that's just on YouTube. It's amazing. It's crazy. But it used to be even more insane. Look at this headline from 2015. President Obama will do Mark Maron's WTF podcast. Well, this is insane. The President of the United States is going to take a break from fundraising to trip down to Highland Park to visit the cat ranch. Mark Maron's garage studio will play host to its biggest guest ever, the leader of the free world. What world are we living in? Guys, we're living in today because this just became normal. And if we're being honest with ourselves, I would say that Donald Trump is the reason why every politician has really embraced social media and influences the way that they have and the way that slow movers are starting to, right? We even see this in Australia. We see Australian politicians that are trying to copy the Donald Trump style of delivery across social media and captions. And it's very cringe and lame because they're obviously copying him, but they're doing it because they're inspired. Because ultimately, I think the reason why Trump won the first election was because he was the first politician to go absolutely 100% all in on social media. Because remember, the guy's an entertainer. That's what he's been doing for most of his life. He knows how to get attention from the public, and he knows that free attention on social media is gold. And he's the first guy to do it. And I think that's why he won the election, because he was the first president to actually utilize meme warfare. Remember that? That's what people were saying all over the internet. Trump was the meme commander. And I think that's why he won, because Hillary Clinton's campaign just could not keep up with how, you know, authentic and flawed and human Trump was being on Twitter, on social media. But then the second campaign, remember what happened? Trump lost Twitter. Trump got banned from Facebook. And I think it really negatively affected his campaign. And when he got those social media platforms back, he was trying to push Truth Social, which obviously hasn't worked. It was a real misstep. And I think that's what cost him the second election. Plus, probably a lot of the insurrectionist rhetoric didn't help. Also, while it is very fun, fresh, sexy, and exciting to have the world's first meme president, that's cool, but when a global pandemic hits your country, you kind of just want an android in a suit to fix it now. In walks Joe Biden. Where am I? What do you mean I'm the president? I thought Barack was the president. Anyway, leave me alone. I'm busy. I gotta find my son. He has a very important laptop that I need. Now that we've covered these two podcasts and the history of presidents on podcasts, it's time for the biggest question of them all. Is Donald Trump or Kamala Harris going to make an appearance on Joe Rogan? Now, this is a huge question because whoever it is, if they have a good or a bad performance on that show, it quite literally could cost them or win them the election. That's how big and influential the Joe Rogan experience is now, that it really could make or break an entire presidential campaign. And that's such a massive responsibility that is on Joe's shoulders. Does he play into it? I know that previously he has said that he would never have Donald Trump on the show because he doesn't want to help him. I don't know if he said that he would or would not have Kamala on. Comment below if you know that. I don't know. But the most recent development is Joe Rogan, or at least Trump, has said that he's going to be doing the Joe Rogan experience. And we might do a video about that if it happens. But if that happens, I would love to see Kamala Harris on right after. In fact, if I'm Joe, and I'm not, I don't have anywhere near the amount of money, and I've got all my hair. But if I am, I don't think I would want to have either of them on if I couldn't get the other. Because that's how influential the show is, right? I wouldn't want to know or fear that I ruined or made one campaign because they had a good or bad episode on my podcast. I would want to have both of them on either at the same time or one right after the other because, yeah, I kind of agree with him. I wouldn't want to help or hinder either candidate if I couldn't take the same risk with the other one. It's almost too much responsibility and influence for one man to have, you know? In conclusion, my hypothesis is we're going to see a lot more of this, okay? Podcasts, influencers, live streams, working with politicians, presidential candidates, marketing executives. I think we're going to even see people like Mark Zuckerberg more often. Obviously, he's turning himself into an influencer. The boundary between every single job and influencer is just blurring. I mean, you can't even be a high school kid without being an influencer on TikTok anymore. Every single person on the planet is slowly morphing into their own mini or maxi influencer, and politicians are no exception. And I think that this campaign is going to prove how influential doing these long form, more relaxed, more authentic interviews with candidates and really leaning into the platform that they're on rather than trying to turn everything into like a boring personality void interview like you see on television that is often cut down from 40 minutes to 3 minutes and spliced up with ad breaks and music. It's boring, it's inauthentic, it doesn't show people who candidates are, and it also doesn't explain policies and the nuances of what their campaign's goal is. So long-form interviews, uninterrupted by ads and fact-checkers and moderators, I think is going to be the norm for every political campaign across the world going forward. Congratulations to Andrew Schulz and the entire team for getting a candidate on, as well as to Call Her Daddy, Alex Cooper as well. Huge gets, amazing, and really, really good for the entire podcast and comedian industry. Really, it really, really excites me. Maybe one day I'll get Anthony Albanese on Spearhead Sundays. I don't think so, but a man can dream. I hope you enjoyed this incredibly long video. It's something that I'm really interested in. I hope you guys liked it. I'm going to be back in a couple of days with something shorter, more comedy based, and yeah, I hope you like it, and subscribe if you're new. Leave a comment. I'd love to know what you think about these interviews, about what my hypothesis, about Joe Rogan, about anything. Comment below. I'll read them. I'll reply to as many as I can. I'm Lewis Spears. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you in a few days. Oh, fuck, it's hot.